Hi there, folks. Welcome. This is Renessa Boley Lane, and as always, we're going to be talking about creating your perfect work. So if you are considering making a radical change in your career, if you're thinking about starting a business, if you've got this big idea, this message that's burning in your heart that you want to get out in the marketplace, then this is another conversation that's going to inspire you, challenge you, equip you, bless you in some way. And so today I'm super excited because I have the honor and the privilege of interviewing Dr. Grace Lee. You're going to learn so much about her over time, but this kind of in the short bit of it, Grace went from being an orphan at just shy of 10 years old to no place to call her own and the like. And she went on to get a PhD in neuroscience, which means that she is brilliant, and then went on to start a six-figure business, coaching. And honestly, Grace could do a whole masterclass on resilience and overcoming and all of that. And you'll know what I mean when you hear her story. But what I love about Grace is her commitment to helping folks everywhere to thrive in their career, in their businesses, to really enjoy more, earn more, do work that they love. And I'm all about doing work that you love. And so I'm super excited to have her here. She's got strategies and tools and tips and mindsets and philosophies that I think are really going to inspire you. So Grace, thank you for joining us. We're really excited to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Renessa, and it is my pleasure to be here.
We're going to have a good time. So I've got my pen and paper handy. I hope you have your pen and paper handy because she's going to drop some golden nuggets during the time that we're talking together. But, I always like to kick it off because it's important to have context of people's backgrounds and where they come from, because that influences, their perspectives and all of that. And for all of us, we've had significant experiences in our life. They could be family situations, they could be tragedies, they could be hardships, all kinds of things that drive how we make decisions now, especially when it comes to creating work we love. It drives how risk averse we are. It drives what we believe is possible, how we perceive ourselves and all of that kind of stuff. And so Grace has a really fascinating story. And when I read about you, it was your story that made me say, hey, she's got to be in this interview series. I want to hear more about her. Would you mind just telling us, a little bit about who you are, where you came from, how you got here? Because I think so many people are going to be as fascinated as I was by your story.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you the 10,000-foot view, right? So I'm originally from Hong Kong. My parents are from there. They grew up there, and I was raised there. My primary years of life were in Hong Kong.
Okay.
Yeah, and they were afraid of the 1997 handover to Hong Kong, to China. They were really afraid of that. So, like a lot of folks who grew up in Hong Kong in that generation, they had plans to come to North America because it was viewed as kind of like the land of milk and honey. They had that viewpoint of it. So they really wanted me to have a Canadian passport, which is what I do have now. And so this was like, they viewed the passport as the gateway to the rest of the world. So interesting, they had me, like I was born in Canada, but they raised me in Hong Kong just so I would have have that opportunity in the future. And so it was, my English was not my first language. I had to learn that at a very young age. And I was reluctant at first because I didn't, I was a very shy child. I was kind of like socially awkward. I always kept to myself.
Who was that? Join the crowd.
I know, right? So I didn't really want to learn English. And my mom was really my best friend. I mean, she was my cheerleader. She took care of me. She was the one that made all the decisions. She gave me my first name. Yeah, and she was my best friend. And it was tragedy because when, like, just before my 9th birthday, my family, and it was my family being both my parents and my older brother and myself, we were involved in a car accident. And it was a high-speed head-on collision. My mom was driving and she was in a coma and she died from that accident. So she suffered like a severe brain trauma just from being in the driver's seat, that collision on her side of the vehicle, and she didn't survive. And it was a tragedy because she was the only parent I was close to. My father was in the house, like we lived under the same roof, but there was no interaction, there was no relationship there. And I thought it was normal because I was born into that type of family dynamic. So I just didn't know him. I knew I had to call him father, in Chinese, but I just didn't know why.
Mm-hmm.
So the loss of my mom was a huge tragedy, a very big trauma on my life. And, I sustained injuries as well. I was in the backseat of the car, and there wasn't a lot of education back then. So my brother and I did not have our seatbelts on.
Mm-hmm.
And we flew. When the car collided, we flew, and I was the second most severely injured. I nearly became a quadriplegic.
Wow.
Very close. I couldn't feel my legs at the time. At the time I couldn't feel my legs, and it was a really close call. But I survived and I recovered, but it was a long recovery. Being in the hospital bed and having the halo brace on my head, it was very long recovery. And when I recovered, during that time I was in the hospital, was when I first had to get to know my father.
Wow.
First time. And it was very rough. A year later, around the time when I was 10, by that time he had remarried, and he was remarried and he started a new family. He had 2 daughters from that new marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So this was like 1 year after, 1 year after the car accident, he remarried and he started a family. And when I was 10, he basically came into my room and he told me, well, my hands are full. I'm at capacity right now. I don't think I have the capacity to care for you. So it was like a impression upon me that I needed to find an alternate route,
Mm-hmm.
someone else to take care of me. And when I'm 10, I'm listening to this, and I just felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I had to leave.
Mm-hmm.
That was my cue that I had to leave. And so I did, but I didn't have anywhere to go. And it was tough because I internalized, the toughest part about that was I internalized his words as I'm not worthy.
Mm-hmm.
As feeling, of course this is happening because I'm so unlovable. I'm not worthy of it. That's why this is happening. And that was the worst part of it. Not that, not anything else, but that was the worst part of it, because for the next few years, I carried that belief. And, it was depression, suicidal as well, until when I was 11, I started working at a restaurant, the family-owned restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And it was my way of having some sort of purpose in my life. And fast forward 3 years later, when I was 14, this couple came to eat at the restaurant, and they were very astute, very observant. And throughout their meal, when they settled their bill, they basically turned to me and said, Grace, I think you need a place to stay. Why don't you follow us home and you can stay with us? Just like that. And I never met these people before. They were customers. They were my customers. So after the shift, I literally followed them home.
Wow.
I was desperate. It was dangerous because they were strangers, but
yeah,
I needed it. So I followed them home, and they led me to their house. They didn't drive, so I actually walked with them home, carrying everything I owned in this backpack, right? Followed them home, and they led me to their home, which was a very humble yellow wooden house. Through the front door was in the kitchen, and then up the stairs, carpeted narrow staircase, right? To the right, and there was this huge bedroom with yellow walls, slanted ceilings, and this furniture, cherry wood, that looked like it was like from the UK in the 1960s.
Wow.
And there I was standing in the middle of the bedroom, the biggest bed I've ever seen at that age. I was just I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
And then they turned to me and they say, Grace, welcome home. Wow. Treat this like it's yours. You can stay here for as long as you like. Right. And that was like, they saved me.
Wow.
They gave me love and a sense of belonging, a place to call home. And it took me 2 years to trust it. 2 years of testing and rebelling, because I was 14, testing and not trusting them, until when I was 16, I finally trusted them, that they were sincere.
Wow.
And that was what elevated me to a higher level of thinking, that I realized that, okay, I am provided for. I don't have to be in survival mode anymore. I can let that part of me go. And that's what freed my mental capacity to think about other things. Like, I want a future. I want to be independent. I want to have things in life. I want a better life.
Yeah.
That was the only way that I could have the freedom to think about it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think it's an amazing story. It's an amazing story of survival, right? Because A lesser person would have been completely broken by that experience. But at the same time, it's also an amazing story of grace. Um, and that's how befitting, because your name is Grace. But having these folks come into your life and open their homes, they didn't know you. It was as dangerous for them as it was for you to bring this child into their home, and they have no idea what your background is. And so for a lot of us, that are listening on the call, we look at our own experiences, things that have happened to us in the past, whether it's personal, whether it's professional, and hopefully we can see the glimpses of grace as well along that path, because nobody does it by themselves. Nobody's truly self-made. There are those breadcrumbs of grace that come all throughout that journey. And so I think that's awesome. And that your parents had set you up with a Canadian, that whole connection and, all of that. Like there was no coincidence in that either.
It's
so how did your experience with your father, with, just being on your own and having to survive, how did that come into play as you started to build your academic and professional life? Because again, I think that sometimes not sometimes, all the time, those experiences really drive how we see ourselves, whether we see that we're enough, whether we're overcompensating, whether we look at life through limiting lenses. Like, how did that, before you got to this brand new version of yourself, how did that impact how you showed up in the world from a professional standpoint?
Yeah. And you see, the thing is, I never felt that I was enough at that time, especially because of the way my father, what he said to me,
Yeah.
and his distance between me and him. I felt that it was because I was not enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just so unlovable. And I would perform well in school, and I would bring home, the grades. I was the one that was a straight A student,
Mm-hmm.
A plus sometimes. I got the bonus question. I got over 100% in tests. That was me, right? That was me.
That was you. She was that chick.
But yet none of that was enough. I was always told that I would not amount to anything. I was told that I wouldn't make anything of my future because of everything the person that I was. I was told this, like verbally, I was told it. So I internalized it as this I could never amount to anything.
Mm-hmm.
And success in the future would always elude me. And this was my belief. But the thing is, when my adoptive parents, actually, rather, when they gave me a second chance and they loved me and they accepted me, and I finally trusted that, of course, I had to finally see it. When I finally saw that as well, then that was when I gave myself permission to want more,
mm-hmm.
and to say that I deserve more.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I had to be resourceful in figuring out a way to how to get there.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have the clarity and the vocabulary I do now to express myself back then. I didn't have any vernacular and the right vernacular for it.
Mm-hmm.
But there was something in me that wanted fulfillment. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know the word yet either. I wanted to be fulfilled, and I wanted to give back to this couple who
Mm-hmm.
gave me so much.
Mm-hmm.
My why was that I wanted to give back to them.
Mm-hmm.
So for what they've done, for the second chance that they give me, I wanted to give back to them. And so it was me getting resourceful. How do I get these things? And in society's programming, your parents, your authorities, they tell you, and this is like a central dogma these days, is if you want a better life, you got to go to school, get good grades,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get a better job.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that programming, I was not immune to that, and it had a strong hold on me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I thought. Oh, education is my ticket to freedom. I need to go to school and get good grades. I need to go to college. And that's the only way I knew how to get what I wanted, was only by going to school. So then it was me, okay, because no one was paying for my tuition.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to be resourceful. How am I going to afford it?
Mm-hmm.
This person I don't have parental support, financial support. And I, coming from a small town, that's where I went to high school, a very small town. And I was so unequipped to go into a big city and make it happen.
Yeah.
But I did. And that was just getting resourceful and realizing that there are scholarships and bursaries, and so for me, it was a do or die moment.
Got it. So you decided to go into neuroscience.
I did.
and not just go into neuroscience. Like you went and you got your master's, then you went off to get your PhD. And so by all accounts, everybody's looking at you and saying, oh my gosh, she's so awesome. She's, because you were an achiever, and that's amazing. Help us to understand why that wasn't enough for you. Because we're having a conversation about creating work you love instead of having this really niched academic conversation around neuroscience. And that's because you made some pivots for yourself. So kind of talk us through, because there's lots of women that are listening to this conversation, and that they're at points of, man, I've gone this direction in my career. I've achieved, I've been resourceful, I've had the scholarship, I've worked, extra hours on the side and all this kind of stuff to put myself through school. Like they have those stories of accomplishment as well, but they're itching to do something different, not sure why.
Yeah.
So what was behind the pivots for you?
Yeah, the pivots of feeling not enough to I am enough.
More so the pivot from, I started out achieving in this direction of neuroscience, because that's what your degree is in, to making these shifts to do different things. Because right now you do something that's completely different, and your whole message is around creating work that you love. But why was neuroscience not quite the right path for you, and how did you make that shift?
Gotcha. It's interesting because I'm not practicing neuroscience the way I quote unquote should be, which is doing research in the lab or having a tenured professorship in university, because that's the traditional path of a PhD. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing, I am using neuroscience in the way I help my clients. Mm. Because neuroscience is understanding the brain and behavior, why we do the things that we do, mm-hmm. and why we behave in a certain way. That psychology, it's neuropsychology, but the neuroscience of it is understanding the makeup of the brain, mm-hmm. and the wiring of it, and why from a biological standpoint we have these programmings that we do. Mm-hmm. So I definitely use it in my teachings. It's applying that knowledge into my teachings. I do. But mm-hmm. It's interesting because the way that I got stuck was exactly what I just alluded to. Mm-hmm. I felt that I would be a failure if I did not use my degree the way it was intended. Mm-hmm. And the way it was intended is, if you go to a PhD, then you have to be a faculty member. You stay in academia, or you go to industry, mm-hmm. but you're doing research, right? Mm-hmm. You are, using neuroscience to produce and to discover things and to find therapies or drugs or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what I thought that was a traditional career path. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, if I spent 9 years in college in total and I don't go down that career path, then I would be a failure. Mm-hmm. And I was stuck in the fear of what that meant. Mm-hmm. Being a failure meant I would let everybody down, mm-hmm. And that, it had such a hit on me because I was so worried about what people might think. Mm-hmm. And even a simple comment like, oh, you spent 6 years, your PhD was 6 years and you're not a professor. Mm-hmm. Do you, how do you feel about not using your degree? Even a simple question like that would trigger me. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'd love to unpack that a little bit, because I think there's a lot that's there. One, I was reading about you, and one of the things that you said, and I'm going to try to quote you correctly, you once said that while pursuing your PhD, you developed quote unquote allergies to your research environment. And I laughed out loud because that has happened to me. Not necessarily allergies in my research environment, but I experienced all kinds of physical ailments and digestive disorders and chronic fatigue associated with being what I call fast lane wrong direction in my career, knowing that I needed to make a shift, something needed to be different. I didn't know what it was. I didn't necessarily have the courage or the clarity to make that shift, but everything in my body was screaming about how wrong of a situation I was in. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit more about that experience with you, because I don't want to put words in your mouth and make assumptions, but what exactly was going on when you were developing allergies to your research environment? Because I think that's going to help a lot of people who need to pay attention.
Absolutely. So the day-to-day work during my PhD in lab research was literally, I was around experimental animals and I was around chemicals, literally chemicals like paraformaldehyde, mm-hmm. right? and paraformaldehyde was one of the stronger chemicals I was around, but it was
Yeah.
a daily thing because I have to run experiments,
Yeah.
because I'm trying to discover therapies, I'm trying to discover things, or make discoveries. That's how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a lot of materials in the lab that I have
Mm-hmm.
to handle. I'm wearing gloves and a lab coat, of
Yeah.
course, but still, sometimes it's in the air, and
Mm-hmm.
you're in that environment,
Yeah.
immersed in it every day. And so it was literally physical allergies to the animals I was dealing with,
Oh.
like hay fever, severe hay fever. And then I leave that environment where the animals are, and in the lab there's chemicals everywhere. And so my skin would raise in hives. It would be peeling.
Wow.
I would have nasal allergies as well. Sometimes my nose would bleed, and
Wow.
it was crazy. Yeah, skin hives, nasal passages, everything. I had the classic hay fever and then more.
You know what? It's funny because oftentimes I'll ask people, what are the signs on the road that something needs to shift in your life? And when it comes to really creating career and business that we love, when we're in a place where it's not working for us, a lot of times we'll justify staying where we are because we have invested so much in our career direction. For instance, I mean, you had a PhD. It's We all know what it takes to actually earn the PhD, but the time, the money, the investment, all of that. And then to have those conversations with people that's like, okay, well, you have a doctorate and you're not going to use your, like all of that weighs in people's minds. But I firmly believe that a lot of times, life gives us clues, and it validates some of those feelings when we know that we need to make a shift. And it starts out oftentimes as whispers, and then if we don't pay attention, it will become screams. And so even though your situation was like a physical allergy to, the environment that you were in, mine, I don't know what it was. Like, I mean, but as soon as I made shifts, like people would ask me years later, well, how, I know you used to have all these, digestive issues, did you ever figure out what was going on? And I'm like, no, I don't know what it was. All I know is it's all good. So I encourage folks that are listening, like, pay attention to what's going on in your life, because sometimes there are clues that are validating those deep-seated desires in your heart, and it cannot get more clear than nosebleeds and skin breakouts and all of that. That's like, you need to do something different.
But
Go ahead.
Exactly. But here's the thing, though. We also need to have the wisdom to discern.
Yeah.
And here's what I mean by that. These clues happen, our bodies, our minds, our souls crying out, right, in that order,
Yeah.
right? Those are cues, yes. But they could be cues of either the environment is not right, or that you're not working and living towards something that aligns with your highest values.
Yeah.
So for example, for me in that lab, if it was still in alignment with my highest values, and it was just because my immune system was allergic to those things, I would find whatever it takes to stay there in that environment, to do the research, right? And I would naturally do it, and I would be inspired to do it. And what that would look like is I might hire, I might hire research assistants to come and handle those chemicals while I do the high level research work. It might be that I create a position for undergraduates to come into the lab and take care of the animal work, which I did. But which I did. So that helped me with the allergies because I wasn't exposed to the animals anymore. So I did that, but I still wasn't inspired. So sometimes the physical symptoms are a result of just your body not being able to handle certain things, but you're still inspired by the work, right? It's still aligned with your highest value. And so that's the first standpoint, is like, physically, what is the reaction you were feeling? What's your body telling you? But there's so many layers, right? Then there's the spirit, and then there's the mind. And so that's why it takes a lot of integration in terms of looking at what are the cues holistically.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'm glad that you made that point. Something else that came out of your story, and the clarification that you made around neuroscience. And, someone on the outside might think, oh, you've gone this path, you've invested all this time and energy and money, and you're not even using your degree. And you were very clear. It was like, no, I still use neuroscience. I just apply it in a different way. And you apply it in a way that aligns so much more to what you value. And I think that's a critical point for people to understand, because a lot of times when we think about making a radical change, there's this fear because we think we've got to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. I've got to go back and get a degree, or I've got to start all over. Everything that I've done here amounts to nothing. And I need, and the reality is, and what I've learned in my own life and what I've seen in countless other folks, is that it's never that way. All the puzzle pieces come together. Whatever that desire is that you really get clear about, you'll recognize that you are designed, from education to experiences to temperament, all of that, to perfectly do that thing. I mean, I have an engineering background, so it's very different than what I do on the surface. But when I'm with people, I'm just using those same engineering skills and breaking down problems in the same way. It's just a different application. So I love that you said that, because a lot of folks a lot of folks appreciate recognizing that, man, everything that I've brought to the table up until this point will support me wherever this next step happens to be, if I'm willing to have the courage to ask the right questions and get honest and reveal and tap in to what it is that I truly desire. And I love that about the conversation, because nothing you've done has gone to waste.
Exactly. And it's a fallacy, right? It's what neuroscientists calls the sunken cost fallacy. Mm-hmm. Right? When you feel that, oh, I've spent 6 years in it, I don't want it to go to waste, right? It's a cognitive bias, right? A sunken cost fallacy, sunk in so much time, therefore it would be a failure or a waste or whatever that adjective is. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing about that, is that if we're not inspired by that work, and it's like, okay, I need to go a different direction, my soul is crying out for me to go a different direction. Sometimes what's happening is that we resist it, but it's because we're judging the form of applying it. Mm-hmm. We assign a meaning to it, that it has to look a certain way, and we're putting a judgment on what does that form look like. If we let that go and we create more of an expansive energy around it, and that creativity and the innovation around it, and we don't judge the form of it, you'll find that the inspiration comes from applying what you've learned, and knowing that everything that you've been doing along the way was never in the way, it was on the way to your perfect work.
Oh, that's a tweetable moment. Yeah. Say that again. The very last thing that you said.
Yeah, everything you've done up to this point is not in the way, it's on the way.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Everything you've done up until this point. So that's a writer downer for anybody that's listening. That is a writer downer. Everything you've done up until this point has not been in the way, but has been on the way.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Because we so often, because we're inundated with a lot of information, and our brains have these biases on what something looks like, including success. Mm-hmm. So we judge the form of success, that it has to look like this. Mm-hmm. Right? And the form that we judge it in is fueled by nudging from society, programming from society, from your parents, from churches, or all these authorities that you've been exposed to. And when you peel back the layers, your soul, your inner self, your higher self, your spirit, sees and feels and experiences success in a way that's quite different from the way you've judged it.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. So that's what I mean. That's why I find it so valuable when I help people to adduce that out of them, mm-hmm. and they feel connected to it. There's a tear of gratitude.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly what it is. You talk about this concept of vocational confidence versus job security. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really, really interesting concept. Tell us more about what you mean and how that applies to women who are thinking about, creating work that they love.
Yeah, absolutely. So job security needs no explanation, because in some implicit or explicit way, we're exposed to that concept. Mm-hmm. The one I mentioned earlier, go to school, get good grades, get a safe and secure job. Mm-hmm. That central dogma is everywhere, not mm-hmm. just in the Western world, but it's in the Eastern world. Look at how hard they work. Everyone's working hard because they want a sense of safety and security. Mm-hmm. We're programmed for that. And the reason why is because our primitive brain, which is like the amygdala, the limbic system part of it, is there. And it was there all throughout evolution to protect us from danger. Mm-hmm. The danger that it's just trying to protect us from, the original design, was from survival, threats to our survival. But here's the thing, our brain doesn't know the difference. When our back's up against the wall, when we're so fearful about the unknown, the future that we can't control, it feels like a threat to our survival. So we aim for job security because it feels like the right fit. It feels so much like the solution we need. And we want that certainty. We crave that certainty because we see how fast the world is moving, how fast the workforce, the marketplace is changing, and it's scary.
Yeah.
So we want that security. And so job security is the thing that we think we should aim for. It's the picture of success that we crave because we've been told that that is the secret, right? That's the magic one that you should get, the picture of success. But if you pursue job security, it will elude you because it doesn't exist, right? Job security is an illusion because really outside of you, there's nothing you can control. Fortune 500 company, Fortune 50 company, you could be in there, work your way up that corporate ladder. One decision from upper management, you could lose your job, right? Even though you've been working there for 25 years, one thing, even though it's an unsatisfactory explanation, you could be fired or laid off. There is no job security. And that's something we just have to acknowledge. But there's no such a thing in this world as challenge without support. There's no such a thing in this world as something that's all negative and there's no positive. Nothing is all one thing without the other. There's dualism.
Got it.
So with job security, it will elude you. So I say don't aim for job security. Instead, aim for financial or for vocational confidence.
Okay. And what does that mean?
Right. So breaking it down, the word vocation is really your true calling. But you look at the dimensions of work. There's like 3 dimensions of work. One of them is a job where you're working to pay the bills, right? That's a job. Work to pay the bills. You exchange time for money, you pay the bills. The second level of the second dimension of work is as a career, where yes, you're satisfying working to pay the bills, but one level up from that, you can afford the lifestyle that you want outside of work, right? So that's the second dimension. But the highest dimension of work is a vocation. That is where you are paying your bills, you are affording your lifestyle outside of work, but it is all aligned with your mission and your purpose, right? It's the highest dimension of work because it is your true calling. You're good at it. You are passionate about it. The world needs it. So you're making a meaningful contribution, right? And you can get paid handsomely for it, because it's your superpower. So that is a vocation. So that's why it's the highest dimension of work. Vocational confidence. The confidence means that no matter what's happening outside of you, that you can't control anyway, like the economy, job postings, the marketplace, you can't control any of those things. So regardless of what's happening on the world outside of you, you know that you can have a setback in your career and you can reinvent yourself again and again. That's vocational confidence. And you can master your professional destiny.
So let's say I aim for vocational confidence. How then does that give me a greater sense of security? Because if ultimately what a lot of us are craving is security, whether that's security in our salary or security in our title or whatever. So we've shifted from the pursuit of that security in the job to this concept of vocational confidence. How does that pursuit actually give us more or grant us more, the very security that we crave?
Yes, it certainly does. Because if you look at the root of seeking security, if you look at the root of that, it's because we are insecure of ourselves, right? So we seek security outside of ourselves to help us with that insecurity, because there's something about us that we don't believe that we can make it happen. So we therefore look at outside circumstances to help us, to give that to us. And so what we're doing is essentially we're giving away our own power to something outside of ourselves and hoping and expecting a return on that time invested. But with vocational confidence, it is the belief in you, belief in your resourcefulness, belief in the human resources that you necessarily have because they are your birthright, right? And so that belief will give you security, because what is more secure than knowing that you can do it, Knowing that you have everything you need inside of you to make it happen in your vocation. That is the highest sense of security that one can have. Because if you are depending on security, that sense of it and the feeling of it, the experience of it from anything outside of you, you can't control that. And the only thing you can control is your actions, your thoughts, your beliefs. So what could be more secure than that?
Got it. One thing that you talk about a lot is applying the principles of building a business to your career.
Yes.
So obviously there's some, folks that are listening who are, thinking about launching a business or going out there and putting a product or service out in the marketplace or taking a message to the market. And so obviously the principles of building a business apply to them. But you're saying that even if you are a careerist and you're going to be a professional for the rest of your life and have no desire of ever hanging out your shingle, it's important to apply the principles of building a business to your career in order to succeed.
Yeah.
What are those principles and how can we apply them to create more of the work that we love?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's many, but I'll highlight a couple of them. Right? There's many. Yeah. With the interest of time, I'll highlight a couple of them. Right. So the thing is, in a business, when you're building a business owners, successful business owners make money because they're putting a product and service in the world and they exchange a lot of money. So the reason why that happens, if you look at the flow of money, is because the entrepreneur has put a high value in the world that solves a very important life or business problem. And the audience that they're giving it to values that product or service. So they will exchange their value for your value. Their value is money, right? And the marketplace only pays handsomely if they see value in exchange for money. And that's how business owners get paid. So that's a principle of business. Value exchange is a principle of business. And principles are principles because they are built upon the foundation of the essence of how money flows. And that stands the test of time. Principles stand the test of time. They are old and they've always been there. So how does this apply to a career? And it's interesting, our language when we separate business versus career. But I disagree with that because a business owner or an entrepreneur, they have careers too. Right? So a career doesn't mean corporate only.
Yeah.
Right. But but for the interest of this conversation, I will refer to a career as working for somebody, working at a company rather than starting your own. Okay. So if you are wanting to the employee path, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. So we shouldn't have, as business owners, we shouldn't have disdain over people who want to work for someone. It doesn't mean that they are keeping their handcuffs on or they have the ball and chain. It doesn't mean that, because not everybody should start a business.
Absolutely.
Yeah, not everybody should. And so what do you do? How do you apply this principle of business acumen into a career where you want to be an employee? If you look at a business, what I just said, the flow of money, value exchange, there is a market, there is a message, and there's an offer. Same thing in your career. If you are wanting to be paid handsomely, in a company that you desire, with an employer that you desire, there's a message that you got to put out there.
Yeah.
Your offer is the services that you provide, and then there is the business model, right? And this is made up of you, right? You have your culture, you have your work ethic, you have your morale. All of that creates your business culture. And so it's time that you start thinking like a business owner and not like an employee. Thinking like an employee means that exchanging time for money. Right. Thinking an employee means that, okay, 9 to 5, 5 o'clock. Okay, I want to leave work at work and I want to spend time with my family or do my own thing. But a business owner is constantly thinking about, how can I add more value into the marketplace? Right. And you might think, well, I don't have a product or service. And the answer is yes, you do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your product and service is you. The value you bring is what is your offer, your skill set. Your knowledge, your skill set, your unique selling proposition. And that is also a business concept.
I love it. It's critical because yes, there's a market. I love the whole concept, market, message, and offer. Because I'm a big proponent. The marketplace doesn't pay for your passion. It doesn't even necessarily pay for your skill or your degree or whatnot. The marketplace really only pays for the value that you can bring to it. And sometimes we're peddling our wares to the wrong market. So when we think about wanting, creating work that we love, we might be doing that work, but we might be doing it for the wrong market. And so, we've got the right skills and the talent, and that's the thing that we want to do, but we're focusing on the wrong market. And so therefore we're discouraged or discontent, or this is not the work that I want to do, so on and so forth. The messaging, to your point, is critically important. And oftentimes we dilute our message so much that the market doesn't put a premium on what it is that we're offering, because the way that we've presented it, how we've messaged to the market, it's not messaged for a premium value, which is how you get highly paid doing whatever it is that you want to do. So the messaging and how we talk about what we do and how we talk about the benefits and the value of what we bring, not just the skill set itself, is critical. And then what is the offer? Are you offering your master's degree from XYZ school? Well, once you get out of school, that offer doesn't really cut it. 10 and 15 years down the path of your career, touting what school you went to or what degree it is, that's not the offer that people are necessarily wanting to buy. They want to buy, what problem can you solve for us? What's your fix? How can you come in and create change and all of that. So I love the way that you've bucketed it, because I think, one, it's easy to remember, but it's really true. And they are very much business concepts. But if a company doesn't master their market, their message, and their offer, they have zero revenue. And so then as a career professional, or as a working professional, or however we want to target, if we don't have the market message or offer, A, we're either not going to be doing work we love, or B, we're not going to be getting highly paid for it. And in anything you do, there's people who make a little bit of money and people who make a lot of bit of money. Yes. And distinction might be in your market message and offer. So that's certainly something that we need to pay attention to. But to kind of segue in, I'm glad, Grace, that you're here. You've given us such food for thought and some really, really great nuggets, even in a short period of time. And I know that you provided an offer for our audience, for folks who are listening, who want to get more of a taste of what you do and the value that you provide in your message. So what gift have you given us? Share a little bit about that and how people can access it.
Sure, absolutely. So this is for women. This is for educated, career-driven women who have unique challenges in the marketplace, right? And I had this, it was a recent shift where I felt, well, I think that I could serve women in a very unique way. And I don't only work with women, but this particular thing is for women that I'm offering today, right? And because women have unique challenges, right? They have challenges in the workplace where they feel that they want to be seen and heard, right? And they feel that they have been not seen and not heard. They feel that when they compete with their male counterparts, they have to work harder and longer and still not be paid as well. They feel that they have to sell their soul to get into the boardroom, to have a seat in the boardroom, right? They feel that they have these pressures. There's a pressure that no one talks about, that they have to be working and available around the clock, both in the office and at home. Right? And they feel that if they're ambitious women, I'm an ambitious woman, then they have to sacrifice their relationship, and the guilt around that, right? So there's all of these unique challenges to women. So what I'm offering is a training for educated, career-driven women on what it means to have that balance in your life, what it means to have it all. They say that for women, we think about the holistic things, right? Our health, making money, our ambitions, the running a household, right? And having relationships with connection with our husbands and with our children. All of those is having it all. Having one dimension is not enough. It's not fulfilling. Like, you can be highly paid at work, you get a seat in the boardroom, but if at home in the household you're disconnected from your husband, it's not fulfilling. Or the opposite, if you have a wonderful marriage, an amazing relationship with your kids, but at work you're feeling undervalued and unappreciated, that's also not fulfilling. So women, we don't seek one dimension. right? We have a hard time seeing a career as just a career and it's separate from our life. We have a hard time seeing it that way. So we want to have it all. So this training that I'm providing is a training of what are the obstructions that are unique to women that stand in the way of us having it all.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So you'll be able to get total access to that. We'll have a link right next to Grace's video, or not video, our interview. So you'll just be able to click that link and you'll get full access to that training. And I encourage you, get connected. Grace is amazing. She's got lots of amazing content. She has a really cool podcast. It's called Career Revisionist. Is that the podcast?
It is, yeah.
She has a really, really cool podcast where she's also interviewing folks from all different walks of life who are really brilliant and amazing on all sorts of topics. And so log in, subscribe, stay connected, because she's truly a force for good. And she's got just lots, and we've only scratched the surface in our short time together. And again, Grace, I thank you so much for being here with us, for taking your time and sharing with our audience. And I'm honored to have learned from you. And I'm taking things, like I've got really, really copious notes on certain pieces, market, message, offer, brilliant. So we're all both, I'll speak on behalf of Grace, but we're both delighted to be here with you guys. And I hope that you got amazing content, a really great golden nugget, something to walk away and apply and move forward in creating your own work, your perfect work. So with that, we'll sign off and we'll say bye-bye, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.